Hello, we are delighted to be joined by Neil OBE, who is going to share some of his knowledge on fostering inclusion and turning challenge into opportunity in times of crisis. But before continuing, I'm going to pass over to you, Rob, to introduce yourself a little bit for the benefit of everyone at home.
Thanks, Grace. Catch. Which way we're looking? I'm not even sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, Grace. My name's Rob Neil. I am a civil servant. I guess I'm regarded as someone who's a long-serving civil servant. Some would say long-suffering. But certainly I've enjoyed all of my career, met some fantastic people along the way. And I guess in the last part of my career, last half of it, now into its 37th year, but for 20 years plus, I've been involved in staff networks, both in creating them and in running them as a member of said networks. So yeah, quite a lot in me around this subject matter of staff networks.
Super stuff. Thanks so much, Rob. And so my first question for you is, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you personally?
Sure. Well, it's a relatively new language, actually, although commonplace now. When I started in the civil service, it was the same subject matter was referred to as equal ops, equal opportunities. It then became equality and diversity, and I think equality will forever be running through it. Often referred to now as D&I, diversity and inclusion. Some places are referring to it as inclusion and diversity because they recognize that it's inclusion that leads to diversity. I think that's something that's spoken about powerfully and compellingly in a great book that I've read by someone called Stephen Frost, who's written something called The Inclusion Imperative. So I'm going to start there by saying, for me, inclusion is really the way in which you deliver diversity. Putting it crudely, diversity is, for me, really the scores on the doors. It's a fact. You are as diverse as you are, and you can measure it. It's the optics. It's the tangible stuff that one can look at and read and evidence. Some organizations evidence it well, others less so. But diversity for me is a fact. It's a measurement, it's the optics, it's what you can record by way of data and evidence. I think inclusion is a choice. I think inclusion is the way we behave to one another. I think inclusion is the way we feel in the organization. I think inclusion is saying good morning, asking after each other's health. It's showing that we care. Inclusion is how we welcome all of that difference, how we invite people to bring all of themselves into the workplace, how we show and give attention to our well-being, our holistic health. I think almost by definition, it's harder to measure. It's harder to see and evidence, but it is one of those things that I think, I love what, it's quite a popular quote now, but what Verna Myers has to say about diversity and inclusion. She says in a quote that's part of a bigger speech, but the quote is that diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And I like that. I like that because it's understanding that it's not just enough for us to reach the place of work. It's more about, and it's vitally important, that we can be all that we are in that place of work. Mm-hmm. And with that quote, that analogy, it's not just about having the coordinates for the party. It's not about getting through the interview and into the building or into the place of work. It's actually being able to maximize your potential. It's actually about getting onto the dance floor and expressing yourself and having your tunes played and knowing that you love the DJ and really coming to life with who you are in the organization, wherever that takes you. So I think they're complementary, yes. I think they can work together and they should work together, yes. But I think inclusion delivers healthier diversity.
Super stuff. Thank you, Rob. And further to that, connection and belonging is quite a salient consideration at the moment for organisations as everyone is socially distancing. But as you've mentioned, it's long been something that you've given thought to in your work. And so could you elaborate a little bit on this and maybe provide some advice for organisations at this time?
Well, yeah, I could give it a go. You know, I've worked in what's known as employee engagement for 8 of my 37 years and counting career. Loved every moment of it. A brand new approach when we delivered it back in the Ministry of Justice at the time. Fantastic team that formed around it. I was a part of that team, and we were pioneers. We introduced a form of measurement around an individual's engagement, and therefore extending that to a team and a division and an organization's level of engagement. And why was that important? Well, because it gave an indication and shone a light on things that the organization needed to work on to increase levels of engagement, connectivity, in order to encourage an individual to bring more of their effort into the workplace, to offer more of their discretionary effort, to not just have an opinion about their work, but actually engage with it in a way that says, how can we develop the work we're doing to do it in a more efficient, a more creative, a more impactful way? I loved employee engagement even before I knew it existed. I loved it in here, in my heart. I understood employee engagement in a way that was, you know, beneath the skin of the words. It was actually me understanding that I'm at my best when I am so engaged with my work. I'm so connected with my work. I belong to my work and my work belongs to me because I bring all of myself into the workplace. You know, it wasn't that long ago. I can certainly remember it in my career time, Grace, where the mantra that many managers would lead with is you come to work and you leave your problems behind. You leave all of that other stuff at home. And it's something I've always struggled with. A number of people have always struggled with, because that's not true, actually. If you're going through a hard time with X or a difficult challenge with Y, it is with you. You bring it with you. And I think that what leaders now understand is that the extent to which we can increase employee engagement, that we can pay attention to connectivity, that we can understand what it is that encourages people to belong to their organizations, not in a way that is restrictive, but in a way that says, I have a share. It's a bit of a John Lewis thing here. You know, I have shares in how we deliver our business. I care. I've got skin in the game. You know, this is a part of me and you are a part of who I am. And so I've always loved that. I've looked and read and studied about employee engagement. I understand the importance of a clear strategic narrative, a clear articulation of where the organization is going. I understand that we need engaging leaders. We lead by example. We're all leaders, but we lead by example. So how are we demonstrating that? I understand that our employees have a voice, and it's important that we not just listen, but we act on those voices. And I do understand, and I've always understood that we've got to say what we're going to do, and we've got to do what we're saying. We've got to have that, you know, integrity is an important part of how we build that trust. And people will soon suss out when we're not being honest and we're not demonstrating integrity. They soon work that bit out. And I think what we do best is to understand those things as we drive for increased connectivity and a sense of belonging.
Super. Thanks so much for that, Rob. And I suppose further to that, as everyone is working remotely, have you got any particular advice around advancing belonging from afar?
Well, it's such a strange time, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the word unprecedented is often used, and I don't think it's overused. I think it's absolutely true. I've certainly not known a time like this, where we are bound. What's the phrase? Social distancing.
Mm-hmm.
That we are bound to really do what we can by staying at home. It will save lives. It will protect the NHS as a major and most critical part of what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I turn back to that term, social distancing, and I think it's absolutely right that we need to pay attention to the distancing, and I think there's a physical distancing that needs to take place. But I'm not so sure that social distancing is the right term. I think here you and I are having a conversation, and hopefully hereafter some people will listen in on this. Is that socially distancing? I think that we can, you know, I can hear you very clearly. I can see you. I can have an understanding. The distance between us is not something that disables us. It's something that enables us to have this conversation. And I think whether it's the advent of software and or technology that's enabling it, we both embrace that, we both appreciate it, and we can have this conversation. So I think my tip is to stay in touch. That doesn't have to be, you know, a physical thing. We can remain in touch in those technological ways that are provided for us. I think we can increase our quality of meeting by giving room and space to check in with one another, to how are we feeling. We can have a compassionate leadership in our approach in listening to each other. We can give each other a good listening to and really draw close to what it is that we're challenged by. Before you and I started this recording, we did it very naturally, Grace. We asked how we were getting on in these unprecedented times. I often refer to it as upside down and inside out. Where does that leave us? It's all a bit up in the air, isn't it? And no one really knows what's going to happen next. Literally this afternoon, let alone tomorrow or next week or next month. We step into the month of May tomorrow as we record this, and who knows when the lockdown will be eased? Who knows when our children will be eased back into schools? Who knows? And I read recently that the BBC are looking to partner with the Department for Education to offer a schooling service behind the red button. You know, a wonderful opportunity there to advance and utilize our technology in order to continue meeting the needs of our children, and indeed the impact that has on parents of children, whether key workers or not. And you know, God bless the key workers for all that they do. And you know, we not just applaud them, but we do what we can to support them in order to carry on doing what they do. So I think what we can be doing at this time is really paying attention to some of the noise that goes on at this time, where we can, reducing the noise so that people aren't necessarily having to endure some of that. Support certainly our essential and key workers. Do all that we can to support them, because that helps us all in the long run. And allow our hearts to really give each other a good listening to. You know, it's the ear that hears, but in many ways we have so many other receptors that can pick stuff up. We can take in information and hear people through our eyes, but let's lead in a compassionate way that allows us to really draw close at this time to what helps, what encourages, what supports, what inspires people to offer their best. And I think that networks are at the heart of that. And any member of the network, not just the leadership in that network, they are critically important, but any member of that network can help do that. Let's share information that supports each other rather than use this time to do things that really only ever can hold people back.
Super stuff. Thank you, Rob. And I suppose picking up on what you're saying about the times of change in which we're living, change does throw up both opportunities and challenges. And so what would you consider to be both the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity of the current moment?
Sure. It's a great question, Grace. It's a great question. And certainly what's popped up as, shall I start with challenge?
Yes, absolutely. Sounds good.
Yeah. I think what's popped up as the greatest challenge, certainly my working experience, is the kind of gravitational pull back to, I'm going to call them traditional norms. Mm-hmm. But the kind of, when we hit that turbulence, when we are under pressure as leaders, there is a tendency to just think really quickly. I think it's what, is it Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow? Think system one thinking. So we think quickly and we grab what's closest to us mentally as well as physically. And we it's the same old, and we pick on the same people, or we ring up the same people, or we dial in to the same people, or we recruit the same people. Mm-hmm. And it's instinctive and it's really quick and we do it. Let's just slow down. Mm-hmm. It possibly a segue into the opportunity here, but let's just slow down a little bit. Let's just engage in some system two thinking. Mm-hmm. Let's just consider, have I extended this opportunity to underrepresented groups? Have I invited the lesser heard voice? Mm-hmm. Have I traveled the road less traveled? Mm-hmm. Have I pushed myself and my thinking into another space that says, I'm not just going to react, I'm going to respond. I'm going to take my time and I'm going to look at what the best option is. And I'm going to invite applications from underrepresented groups. I'm going to encourage them to apply. I'm going to pivot people into position to ensure that what we end up with is the most diverse outcome that we can get. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to happen out of this pandemic, this uninvited virus that has somehow gripped us all and forced us to work differently? What if out of that adversity, we emerged with a new way of working that said, you know what, no more am I going to be turning away from the way that's wonderfully different and invites difference. We could work our way through this crisis and emerge with an even better way of working. And that for me is the excitement I'm holding on to through these real eye of the storm challenges. It's almost like we're going to, how can I say it? It's almost like we're going to deal with the virus within the virus. So when we come out the other side, we're not only protected against the pandemic that is coronavirus 19, COVID-19, but actually we're going to have a ready-made antidote to anything else coming, because we've learned from that experience in such an exciting way.
Super. Thank you so much for that, Rob. And I suppose in less than 2 weeks' time now, we'll be celebrating Staff Networks Day on May 13th. And so I was wondering, within what you're saying about crisis, opportunity, challenge, how they all intersect, what would you consider to be, I suppose, how would you apply what you've been saying to the world of staff networks at the moment?
Sure. No, it's a great question, Grace, and I get it straight away. Not least of which because with some wonderful, wonderful people at the Power of Staff Networks, I've been doing some work to help the National Day, which is this year on the 13th of May. It's on the second Wednesday each year, and we're into our fourth year with this. I guess it's a campaign really about raising awareness. And each year we've got a theme. Last year it was making work better. This year, and I'll start here, it's adding value. Mm-hmm. And I think through this crisis, and it is through the crisis, leadership through the crisis, our response within and across organizations is, I think, best managed when we acknowledge the value that networks add. Mm-hmm. You know, I think one of the things that this current pandemic has highlighted is the importance of remaining connected, mm-hmm. of networking, mm-hmm. ironically enough. And I want to be perhaps a little bit cheeky by saying to organizations, some of your people, some of your staff, some of your employees have been networking way before COVID-19. You know, staff networks have been around for at least 20 years. I've been involved in a number of them over the last 2 decades. And whilst I will fully accept that some of those networks have not been performing at their very highest level for all sorts of reasons, a lot of them have been. A lot of them know how to do this. You know, they know how to network. You know, at the Power Staff Networks, you've got Sharon and Kotara. Her book, The Incredible Power Staff Networks, that title isn't an accident. That's a title born out of her experience, born out of her leadership, born out of her work with staff networks, incredibly powerful staff networks across the public and the private sector. So when you invite me to make a connection between the challenge and the opportunity, the weaknesses and the threats that there are in this current moment, I place staff networks. I choose to place staff networks at the heart of that. Why? Because they are committed individuals coming together to listen to one another, empathy, to identify better ways of working, thought leadership, to then offer to the organization a enhanced way of working that is just absolutely incredible. It's as if through this tragedy, a moment such as this was meant to bring to the fore the incredible power of staff networks. And that is why on the 13th of May, the Power of Staff Networks and its wider team will be holding 3 webinars, a breakfast, a lunch, and an afternoon tea, where people will come together to celebrate inclusion, to demonstrate their diversity, rooted in the incredible power of staff networks. It doesn't get much better than that.
Super stuff. Thank you so much, Rob, for your time and for your insights. So valuable, so engaging as ever. So thank you, and speak soon.
Thanks, stay well.